Hi, how are you? We're talking about this. Either side.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if we could Have everybody take a seat. It's 7:30 and we should get started. Oh, everybody quieted down fast. All right. Thanks for coming tonight on behalf of the Minneapolis DFL and the Ward 11 Organizing Committee. Welcome to this forum of City Council candidates. They're going to be introducing themselves and answering a few questions, and then they've all got tables around here, and you get a chance to talk with them. And we also have Fair Vote Minnesota over here, so if you have questions about how ranked choice voting works. And first, I've been asked to explain a little bit about how precinct caucuses work. My name is Eric Ferguson. I am the chair of Senate District 63, and I live in Ward 12. Thanks for allowing me to come over.
Where's your passport?
Mostly I don't have a dog in this hunt. How many people have never been to a precinct caucus? All right, okay, great. I can start with basics, not for everybody. Terrific. If your only experience of precinct caucuses was last year, this is going to be a whole lot simpler. Essentially what happens at a precinct caucus is you get together in a room like this with other people who live in your precinct. So these are literally your neighbors. You're sitting with people who are across the street from you or down the block or whatever. So you look around the faces in the room. That is the local Democratic Party, which is why I like precinct caucuses for party building. The Democrats are you there sitting there in the room. And the business of the precinct caucus, there would be somebody there called a convener who will get things started, who will guide the process, who's supposed to know what's going on. They've been through some training, so they know the agenda and how things proceed. So you don't have to know that. And we train the conveners to take things slowly, step by step, explain what they're doing, so that nobody can get lost. So when some well-intentioned people are holding a caucus training, you might infer from that, oh my God, you have to go to training to go to caucuses, it must be really complicated. No, it's not. It really isn't. The convener knows what's going on and basically just follow along. You have to elect a chair to the caucus, who usually is the convener, for the simple reason that they know what's going on. Your precinct may have precinct chair vacancies to fill, possibly. So if you've wanted to get involved, there's a very good chance. Precinct chair is a good place to get started if you're looking for a place to get started. So I absolutely recommend that. Getting elected as a precinct chair or precinct vice chair will put you on your Senate District's Central Committee. So if you're in 63, that's my district. I would be happy to have you, and I'm sure that 61 or 62 would be happy to have you too. Then you elect delegates to the ward convention, and the convention for Ward 11 is going to be on April 29th, and the business of the convention is to consider the endorsement of the candidates that we're about to have right here in front of us. And then the last order of business is to elect delegates to the city convention, which is going to be July 8th. And the city convention is going to consider endorsing candidates for mayor, park board, and board of investment and taxation. So you possibly heard, like, it's really complicated how elections work. Usually not, actually. Especially for the ward convention, where you've got huge numbers of delegates, there's a pretty good chance that getting elected is saying, yeah, but I can go to the convention. Okay, you're elected. There's enough delegate slots. That's usually all it takes to be able to go to your ward convention. The city convention, you might have elections, and elections aren't that scary. The most common method is that people who would want to be delegates will have to tell the rest of the group why they want to be a delegate. Maybe they'll have to say who they're supporting, and then the folks attending the precinct caucus will vote on who they want their delegates to be. And that's the precinct caucus. It really is about that simple. Are there questions, though? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned July 8th. What if you were out of town? Do you have to be there?
Yes. There's unfortunately no absentee voting for conventions, so you do have to be there. Thank you for allowing me to mention absentees. You have to be present to vote at the precinct caucus. You do not have to be present to run for delegate at the precinct caucus. If you go to the Minneapolis DFL website, it's mpls.dfl.org. You go to the caucus and convention documents section. One of those documents is an absentee participation form. So if you cannot be present at your precinct caucus yourself, you can fill in one of those forms, send it to your caucus convener, or send it to the ward chair so they can send it to the caucus convener, or have a neighbor just carry it in for you, which is the most common method. And you can still run for delegate, or if you have a vacancy for precinct chair, you can run for precinct chair without having to be present. And something else I want to mention, this is actually a big thing, I can't believe I forgot this the first time through. Something new this year, no one's ever done this before. We have pre-registration for precinct caucuses. You go to the Minneapolis website, mpls.dfl.org, and at the top, in big red letters, it says, click here to pre-register for the caucuses. You click that, you put in your address, and it'll tell you which precinct you're in, solving the very common problem of people going to the wrong precinct. And you put in your contact information, and it'll give you a confirmation number. You are registered for the precinct caucuses. When you get there, all you will have to do is find the list of people who pre-registered, sign your name to say that, yes, I did actually show up, and there you are, no waiting in line. Yes, ma'am?
So you don't need a printout of your registration? Because I had heard at one point that people would need to have a printer to print out the page saying they have registered and be able to bring that as well, not just sign on to a book.
You can. It's possible to pre-register right up until 7 o'clock, but we're going to make the printout after midnight on the 4th. So if you sign up on April 4th, on caucus day itself, then you're going to want that confirmation number. A printout's good, or bring it on your phone or your tablet, whatever, just so you can show your confirmation number. You'll write that down on the sign-in, put your name in next to it. There you go. You're good. If people don't want to pre-register, that's fine. There are going to be a pre-printed list of people who showed up at the 2016 caucuses, so if that includes you, you can flip through that and find your name in there, and you can sign in that way and just verify that all your information is correct. And we also have blank forms where you just write it all in. We just kind of hate that for doing data entry later on because we're trying to read handwriting. Loads and loads of handwriting from people who maybe were in a hurry or don't write by hand very often. This is one reason why we're doing the pre-registration things. Yes, sir?
Could you repeat that website, please?
mpls.dfl.org.
And you sell our information off of that website?
I wish I could.
Somebody else has got that covered.
Yeah, somebody somewhere, yes. No, not, yeah. We don't get really sell that, nothing way to sell it to. All right, are we ready for the candidates then?
Yes.
So if you have, yes ma'am,
No,
one last question and.
You know where the ward convention is going to be?
Is the ward convention going to be at Washburn?
Also Washburn.
Okay, so both the precinct caucuses and the Ward 11 convention are going to be at Washburn High School.
What time?
What time is your convention?
Call to order at 10. Registration opens at 9.
Okay, so register at 9, in case anybody didn't hear it. Register at 9, call the convention to order at 10. The precinct caucuses convene at 7, sign-in opens at 6:30. So at this point, if you got any more questions, just ask me afterwards. I'll be here with all the candidates and everything. I'm sure they're much more interesting than I am. So let's get on with that. Let's bring up the candidates.
Actual straws to draw for our speaking order.
Actual straws, okay. All right, here we go.
Let's draw straws. Or you get one straw.
I got this one.
So whoever's short, you can go first, and then
I'll go
middle
first.
and tall.
All right.
So we'll go Erica, John, Jeremy, and we'll just rotate for the question and answer after.
All right, so just to introduce everybody. So starting stage right, Erica Mauter, John Quincy, and Jeremy Schrader. Yes, go ahead. Give them a round of applause. Running for public office is a very hard thing. For one thing, you got to sit here in front of a bunch of people who are listening to you.
Judging us.
Yes. So the rules here are each candidate is going to get 5 minutes to introduce themselves. And then I have a list of questions here. Each candidate is going to get 90 seconds to answer each question. And I'm going to try and start each question with a different candidate. I'm going to try to keep track. You might have to remind me because I could see myself losing track. And Sean has a time card here. It'll be more than 15 seconds. You'll be told to stop. And when the stop goes up, you don't stop. He jumps, he waves it around like he's asking for the t-shirt can and fire it this way. We don't have a t-shirt can. Okay. So, Erica, yeah, you can go first.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming tonight. Thanks to the Ward 11 DFL committee for putting this together, especially Sean for organizing. My name is Erica Motter. I'm running for City Council here in Ward 11. I live in the Tangletown neighborhood with my wife, Missy, and our 2 dogs, Peanut, Louise, and Florence. They're internet famous. Check them out. I'm just going to tell you how I came to be here and go from there. So I moved to the Twin Cities after college for a job. I worked as a chemical engineer for 12 years. And after about a decade in the pharmaceutical industry, decided that was enough of the pharmaceutical industry. So I did a master's in organizational leadership at St. Kate's, and now I work as the executive director of the Twin Cities Women's Choir and Girls Choir. So those are obviously completely different careers from each other. I sang with the choir and was on their board while I was working as an engineer, and my sort of life transition coincided with their desire for a leadership transition. So, but those 2 careers that I've had really inform my approach to governance. One's very solution-oriented, process-oriented, doing creative problem-solving inside really peculiar constraints. And the other job, especially now as I work, we primarily serve women and girls, and we talk a lot about our vision for ourselves. How are we trying to make the world a better place? What are our values? How are we treating each other? How do we get there? And I think both of those things matter in a governance and a leadership position. All my volunteer experience has been in the arts and in social justice organizations, most notably with Project 515 and Minnesotans United, and currently with the Headwaters Foundation for Justice. I also currently serve on the city's Capital Long Range Improvements Committee, which I actually find really exciting. It's a citizen advisory committee that reviews capital projects, and makes a recommendation to the mayor and the council on the capital budget. So, I find paving and sewers and parks to be really interesting. I know not everyone thinks about it that way, but I think it's pretty cool. So I'm running for city council because given that kind of experience to date, I've been thinking about how do I continue to contribute to the community and thinking about how the city has such a deep impact on our day-to-day life, which I think that all of you are here right now, that you're kind of in that same place. That's a system that if we want to change it, we got to work it from the inside and the outside. We have a lot of great organizations doing that work on the outside, and I'm committing to being that strong partner inside city government. The other thing is kind of thinking about the state of our country right now, what I want for us, and what I think we need in the city is transformative change. Kind of where we've been has maybe been good enough so far, but what we need right now is really different. Just thinking about state and national politics and a state government that's antagonistic to our city, federal government that's antagonistic to our city, we're all here because we believe that the city has the power to make positive change in our lives. But the path we're on right now is not going to get us there. So if you believe, like I do, that we need to make a transformative choice, I'm going to invite you to join me and everyone else in the country to make a choice that is resistance. Okay? We can be a model, Minneapolis can be a leader for other cities on what it's like to actually be a sanctuary in every sense of the word. So I invite you to join me on that path. Thank you.
John, just before you start, folks standing in the back, there are some seats up here, so if you're standing for lack of seating, you may sit. You just have to move in front of everybody else, that's all. So, John?
Good. Thank you, Eric. And thanks again for everybody for joining us tonight. It's really terrific to see you out
and participating. This is the first level of civic engagement, and nothing's more important than at a local level. So thank you again for coming. Before I forget, I wanted to acknowledge my wife Ann and my son Sam who were there. If I didn't do that now, I would forget later, and then I would really not feel good about that. So thank you. Also, thank you, Eric, for hosting us here and for moderating. Sean, great work putting this together. My name is John Quincy. I'm your Minneapolis City Council member here for the 11th Ward. You are sitting in the 11th Ward, of course, in the 5th Precinct, and just across the street is my house. This is a building that really means a lot to me. It was really the foundation of when we started getting involved in local politics, local issues. It was on this building as we were starting the NRP process, and the neighborhood association said, what do we need for our community? And we wanted to do an extension. So we're in this part of the building that's new to the and the gym next door that was part of local action. Ann and I moved here 24 years ago. And we moved here because our oldest son at the time, our only son at the time, was about to turn 5, and we were trying to figure out where are we going to send him to kindergarten. We were down in the Chicago area, and they were on their 3rd teacher strike, I think, in 9 years. And this is not the environment we wanted to be in. So with a map, we literally researched cities. And so we're that kind of family that moved to Minneapolis from Chicago without a job and a pregnant wife and no family ties, no connections. But we picked Minneapolis for many of the same reasons you did, or the reasons you've stayed, because of our great schools, because of our great parks, and our great can-do attitude and how we support each other as a city. That's why we moved here, and that's why we loved it so much. So as I became involved in politics is really because I got involved in the community. What brought me to this work was, first of all, I talked about the Hale Page Diamond Lake Neighborhood Association that was undergoing its transformative years as we were starting to figure out how we were going to spend NRP money, Neighborhood Revitalization Program funds. And then as my son started going to kindergarten, and then we had our youngest son, Joe, we got involved in schools. And if you live in the 11th Ward, that's what you do. We have a tremendous volunteer base and active energy about how you commit yourselves to your kids' schools and how you make sure those resources are coming and you're having an active role. And so I became involved in the site council over at Hale School, and then when we got over to Field School, I became the PTA chair. I was the PTA chair at Field School for 4 years. And as part of that, we got involved in school district politics issues, because we were at a tough time. I don't know if you guys recall, but this was when Tawanda Peebles was the superintendent and was just leaving. Okay, some people chuckle, we remember. Those are tough years. I thought the school district was lacking a strategic direction and some leadership gaps on the school board, and we had some funding crises. And this was when we were doing the first school board referendum. The one we just passed this year was 8 years before. That's when I started getting in politics, was on the school board referendum. And we were asking for a big increase. And I was on the Speakers Bureau. I got involved in the District Parent Advisory Committee. We got involved in school board politics. We started doing the strategic plan. We hired a superintendent, Bill Green, stabilized the ship. Then we brought in Bernadette Johnson. That's how we got involved. And now I got involved in politics as chairing school board campaigns. I just chaired Tom Madden's campaign, Carla Bates's campaign, Alberto Monserrati campaign. And then I've been involved in DFL politics ever since. And continued to be out there banging on doors, working for legislative districts, being on the state central committee, and being a precinct caucus. Now on the city council, I have the pleasure and honor of being the DFL majority leader, as well as the chair of the Ways and Means and the Budget Committees, as well as serving on the Community Development Regulatory Services Committee and the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee. These are all opportunities that came from experience. After working on it for 4 years, we became into the next 4 years, and that's where we have leadership. And that provides the experience and the proven progressive values that I've shared with this city and continue to hope to do in the future as we continue to move Minneapolis forward and to be one Minneapolis. stop sign. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
And Jeremy Schrader.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Jeremy Schrader, and I am here to run to be our next city council member. I'm originally from Wisconsin, but Minnesota has had a really big part of my heart for a very long time. My grandma lived here, so every holiday we were here. Every summer I was up in the Boundary Waters with my dad fishing. Katie, my partner, and I moved back to the Twin Cities 6 years ago. Much for the same reasons, John, we really were able to look at, where could we move that reflected our values? Where was a place that had that sense of community? And we ended up right here in South Minneapolis. We looked and we wanted to be close to parks. We wanted to be close to people that had the same values we did. And when we talked to neighbors, they talked about other neighborhoods, other neighbors and other neighbors, that the things that they cared about. They were talking about their values. They weren't talking about their house or their yard or anything else. And that's the community we wanted to be a part of. So we set down roots here. We wanted to make sure that our 2 boys and also our 5 chickens had a good place to live. And so we've been here ever since. My background is that I'm an attorney with over 14 years experience working in the nonprofit sector. And what I would bring to City Council is a successful career building diverse coalitions that come up with creative solutions that work for the entire community. I continue to do this work every day. Right now I'm the policy director for the Minnesota Housing Partnership. In that work, I work with elected officials on both sides of the aisle throughout all of Minnesota to make sure more people have affordable housing to call home. I believe that Minneapolis is on a great trajectory. It's why I'm here. It's why I'm setting down roots. But one of the reasons I'm running is that I really think that without a more holistic approach to solving our major problems, the benefits that are happening will not benefit everyone in this city. So tonight is really about getting to know your candidates better. Some of you already know me through my work with Hale Page Diamond Lake Neighborhood Association. Others have gotten to know us through our Neighbor to Neighbor campaign. Others have called with questions and emails, and I've really enjoyed getting to talk a little bit more and learn more about the history of this neighborhood. I've spent my entire career working on making positive change happen. As a city council member, what I'll really bring, I won't just be content to vote on issues. I'll be proactively working to make sure we have different solutions that work for everybody. I have the experience working on politically charged campaigns, and I think that's exactly what we need right now with the federal and state level as they are. We're going to need somebody that knows how to deal with both sides, how to play politics the hard way. I led the Illinois coalition to abolish the death penalty, and in 2011 we became the 4th state in the modern era to abolish capital punishment in Illinois. And we did that, we won that uphill battle because we talked to law enforcement, because we talked to murder victim family members, because we talked to the faith community, and then we also talked to the community leaders, and we were able to come up with a solution that worked for everybody. In addition to that, I also led the legislative efforts for a labor union of 85,000 low-wage workers. Together, we were able to raise the state minimum wage in Illinois, and I wrote the bill that gave health care to those low-wage workers for the first time. Here in Minnesota, I've continued that collaborative work. I work with a coalition of over 150 organizations, and every bill that we work on is bipartisan. What really sets me apart from the other candidates is my approach. I have the difficult conversations early. I'm not afraid to look at the hard facts. And when you combine this mindset with how hard I work, you get more creative options and better, more sustainable solutions. My track record, my successful track record really proves this and really has shown that the leadership style that I've developed over the last 20 years working in communities creates a more just and thriving society. I believe this is important because simply voting for one of us is not enough to guarantee results. My to-do list, while important, is not as important as the results I'm able to give for this community. It's important that we're going to need to build coalitions and build the collaborative networks, something I've done time and time again. After doing this for decades, I can assure you that when I'm in office, your city council will be more collaborative, reaching out to the neighborhood, finding proactive solutions that work for all of us. I believe with my background in housing, labor, and the criminal justice reform, I'll be able to get this done on the hard issues, including working on housing and closing the racial equity gaps. And finally, You know, I believe in the empowerment of government to make positive change. I think our city government should be able to help us live an extraordinary life. I love this neighborhood, and I think it's ready for change. I also hope you will join with me tonight to build a city government that reflects our dedication to community that we see already here in Ward 11. Thank you very much.
Okay, so for the questions, we're going to keep moving to the right, so everybody will take a turn starting first. And so, John, you get the first question. And if anybody wants a question repeated, just let me know. Memories fade, I know how that goes. What is your position on Minneapolis raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour? And do you support a tip penalty as part of any new ordinance?
Well, thank you for the question. Obviously, we're hearing that a lot right now. Just to be clear, my position on raising the minimum wage is and always has been that we should. At this point, we haven't decided on the amount, but I do support a $15 minimum wage increase. This is just a minute and a half on the time, right?
Right.
And so, but the bigger question here is the tip penalty itself, and I consider it a tip penalty, so I'm not supporting a tip penalty or an exemption. These are things that are still under process. We're having our listening sessions, and I think it would be arrogant for us to come out and say what we're going to do without listening to the input. We're still gathering across the city, but I expect from what I'm hearing and from what I can see on the council that we'll be raising the minimum wage as we promised we would do, as we looked at the data, as we've done the research. We've seen the impacts, we've seen the risks, and we're certainly ready to take that action as a leadership position. And I think that'll be done probably in May of this year. So that's where we're at right now.
All right, Jeremy?
I also support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, but doing so incrementally and also without a tip penalty. The reality is low-wage workers need a raise right now. With the high cost of housing, childcare, and healthcare, there really are not a lot of options. This is a complex issue that affects nonprofits. It affects, how I've done business when I've run nonprofits before. And I think we need to have something that's thoughtful. And I also think we need this especially when it comes to small businesses. We need to have an answer for when they say, I won't be able to have my budget. I won't be able to pay my workers. We need to have a thoughtful answer that looks at their other parts of their budget. Something that includes looking at their property, at the property taxes for small businesses that are affected by this change. Also looking at the fees that are paid to the city. When I work on a solution, I want both sides to see their part in it. I want to have assurances that when we raise the minimum wage to solve the very real issue that low-wage workers need an increase, we aren't creating another problem with small businesses in this district. I also want to acknowledge that $15 an hour doesn't get us to a living wage. This is just the beginning, and I'm committed to making sure low-wage workers and anyone that lives in this city is leading a great life. Thank you.
Erica.
I wholeheartedly support raising the minimum wage to $15. I do not support tip penalty or any other exception. Minnesota is one of the few states that doesn't have a tip penalty, so we don't need to introduce one now. Research shows that the pay gaps that exist in other jobs between white men and everyone else also exist in tipping practices, and a tip penalty exacerbates that effect. I learned a really interesting example of how a $15 minimum wage can really make a difference in someone's life. People who work in the restaurant business, who are supposed to have their wages garnished for child support, often don't actually get their wages garnished because with the tip penalty, their wages on paper aren't enough to garnish in the first place. So a $15 minimum wage with no tip penalty would actually really help with child support compliance. So think about that effect on those children and those families. But I do also think that we need to take care to bring along our smallest business owners, especially because business creation, along with home ownership, is one of the most reliable paths to wealth creation for people, mostly people of color, who don't benefit from inherited wealth. So we need to find a way to implement the change that allows our smallest business owners to adjust. But first and foremost, this is an anti-poverty measure. It's an equity measure. It will benefit people of color, women of all races, the working poor, and all the people in Minneapolis that we should be lifting up.
All right, so So Jeremy, we'll start with the next question. If anybody in the back just came in, there are seats up here. Don't need to stand. All right. What are your ideas for improving police-community relations in Minneapolis, and how will you work to implement and sustain them?
I really get this question first, huh?
Yes.
So when I talk to my neighbors, what I hear a lot about the slow response time by police, and I hear about the lack of attention to property crimes. At the same time, our police force killed an unarmed black man, Jamar Clark. Something is wrong. We need to change that right now. When I worked to abolish the death penalty, I did so because I saw a broken system, and for me, I work on the part that's broken first, the part that is the worst. And we were successful, not because I'm really charming and I convinced cops that they didn't need the death penalty. Half of that is not true. The cops did not, they still believe in the death penalty. But it was hard. It was really hard. We had to talk to cops that saw me just as a community activist that wanted to abolish the death penalty. That was pretty accurate. But after a while, we started to really listen. And the truth is, people don't listen to cops. If you sit down and talk about what's wrong with the system and truly listen, they will tell you. And it took a long time to build that relationship, but we were able to come up with a solution that they saw themselves as a part of. We were able to abolish the death penalty, take the money that was saved, and then put that into training for law enforcement. That's exactly what we need to do now. We need to listen to both sides. We need to make sure the community that's been telling us that there's a problem, that we listen to them. And then we also make a safe space for police to be able to find out what is actually wrong. How would you police yourself? Thank you very much.
Erica.
So let's first recognize that public safety needs are different in different parts of the city. And the best way to improve police-community relations is to let our own communities determine what's needed for public safety. Our police should be community-oriented, and service-oriented, and focused on de-escalation tactics. We need culture change in the police department. It's a long-term project, I understand. I support the initiatives that are currently underway to get at that culture change, which includes implicit bias training, de-escalation training, and expanding our community service officer recruitment in an effort to diversify the police force. We should also be investing in restorative justice practices. Requiring police to carry their own liability insurance will change their willingness to accept bad behavior from problem officers really quickly. That puts the burden of settling lawsuits incurred by a small number of officers back on the police union and not on taxpayers to the tune of $2 to $3 million every year. Property taxes in Ward 11 are disproportionately high, so we are paying for problem officers in downtown and North Minneapolis. As a person of color, simply having more police around doesn't make me feel safer necessarily, especially when the police union refuses to take responsibility for problem officers. We all need to think about public safety beyond just police. We should be investing in dispatching more appropriate first responders, if that's social workers, youth workers, mental health professionals. Some of these already exist. They deserve more funding, and I'd rather pay 3 social workers instead of 2 police officers.
The question, I think, is great, and it might be worth repeating before we start the clock. Is that okay?
Oh, sure. What are your ideas for improving police-community relations in Minneapolis, and how will you work to implement and sustain them?
Right. That's why I really wanted to focus on, there's 2 levels of that question that's really important. One of the ideas to improve the relationships. The other one is about how to make them sustainable. Implement, sustainable. I think we are at a transformative time across the country, but especially here in the city of Minneapolis, where it requires Minneapolis solutions for Minneapolis problems. I'm very excited, actually, about some of the things that Erica just outlined that's in process in this last 4 years. This mayor and this council has been very, very deliberate about what we're trying to accomplish through the police department. And I'm a big supporter of Chief Harto and her. We're in the middle of it. We're in MPD 2.0. And in the midst of that very real, very long-term strategic vision for the council and the police chief, it's really rooted in community engagement and the community policing strategies. She's just been recognized as a national leader in this. This is something that her Chiefs Association nationwide and the Mayor's Association and our governor have all been looking to the city of Minneapolis for ideas. Now, we certainly faced a tragic shooting with Jamar Clark. But I think the great strength was how we took that on ourselves and we asked for an outside expert from the DOJ to come in. And we learned from that process. It takes courage to ask for that, and it sure takes courage on how to implement some of those changes. And some of the opportunities to be sustainable on that would be some of our hiring practices that have been implemented, and we're making a big change on who we're recruiting as officers and how we're having them look like and represent the communities that they live in. Thanks very much.
All right, Eric, you start with this question. What are the biggest barriers facing entrepreneurs in Minneapolis, and how will you work to promote vibrant and thriving small businesses in our community?
Yeah, so access to capital tends to be a bigger barrier for people of color and women of all races. The city can provide or connect entrepreneurs with low-cost financing. We could be more aggressive about meeting our own hiring goals for all types of projects. The new target market program gets at this, but even then you have to be a relatively established business to be eligible for that. The regulatory environment is confusing. We have a new navigator system, which is great, but it shouldn't be that complicated in the first place. Technical assistance for businesses is a big challenge. There's an analog in the foundation world where funders provide feedback and guidance to the organizations they're funding to help them be successful with the funds that you're giving them. There's an organization called NEON, the Northside Economic Opportunity Network. They're a great example of an incubator that does that work. How can the city incubate more NEONs? The other opportunity we have, and I think this is especially prevalent here in the ward, is that we have a lot of small commercial nodes in the middle of neighborhoods. And as a council member, I see an opportunity to do some matchmaking with the residents of those neighborhoods, the owners of those buildings, and the businesses in those storefronts.
Sure. Thanks. I think the biggest barriers, I think, kind of fall into two areas. One is about the risks associated with starting or sustaining a small business, and the other one is really about some of the technical aspects of running a small business. So what the city can do and does to a large degree is hear from small businesses what their issues are. In the past 4 years, we've started the Business Made Simple program, which eliminated a lot of the regulatory concerns that we were hearing, and we also got rid of a lot of ordinances and business license requirements. That made it simpler to do business with. And as part of that process evolved, especially as we implemented this paid sick leave, and we're talking about minimum wage, and we're talking about wage theft, and all those other issues, we really looked to how we could provide technical support to those businesses, and that's what we've expanded. We need to continue our relationship with our small business associations, with our small business community. We need to make sure that we're providing resources, like our 2% financing loans. We're providing some of the financial assistance with the facade improvement loans. We're making it a more walkable city. We're thinking about small businesses and how the city can help you navigate that process. I started the Target Market program. We're talking about our change in procurement and how more people, more small businesses, small and underutilized businesses, women-owned or people of color, can participate in the economic participation of the city, running the city. And that's where we're at right now, and we need to keep that energy going forward. Thanks so much.
So actually, answer the second part of the question first. When you listen to neighbors and look around the neighborhood, we do not have a lot of business nodes compared to other parts of the city. We really have to be thoughtful. We really have to be proactive to know what those businesses want, what the neighborhood wants, and what would fit going in there. Through my current work with the neighborhood association and my kind of housing work with developers of business, I've really seen the difference that an elected official that can be that hub can make that difference. And I'm pledging to be that hub, to be the person that is talking, is involved in the community, that knows exactly what business is missing, to know what the business, where the business community wants to go, and what area parts of the neighborhood they want to get into, and also make sure that when properties show up, that we're making sure that all those connections are made. To answer what's the biggest barrier for entrepreneurs, I would say it's isolation. I feel when you have a new idea, you don't know if you need to get a loan or if you need to go to a new market. And more than that, if you have never done that before, you don't actually know who's your friend and who's your competitor. The city made a very good first step in making sure that there's now going to be a dedicated staff person to start to navigate that, but we need to do more. I would really like to see in the community navigator, community incubator areas. This has been tried in other parts of the city. We could be able to use community assets to make sure that they have mentoring, places for technology, and kind of the basic infrastructure that they need. Thank you.
All right, and John starts the next question. What steps can the city take to ensure that stable and affordable housing options, both subsidized and market rate, remain available to low and middle income residents in Minneapolis?
Well, affordable housing is one of my passions and one of the things I've been very proud to work on over the past 2 terms. Minneapolis has a very unique and successful approach in creation of affordable housing opportunities, and we need to support that as much as we can. As budget chair for the first 3 budgets, and will be the next one coming up, it's the first time we fully funded our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That's a big step. It's over $10.5 million that we're able to commit to the creation or to the rehabilitation of affordable rental opportunities. I think our challenge going forward is some of the funding streams attached to that, especially at the federal level. I was pleased to play a role with Secretary Castro on 3 occasions over the last several years under the Obama administration as we created the Prosperity Playbook and how we're going to maybe be able to sustain affordability in a big city. And so we had a lot of plans in progress, and at the National League of Cities Conference just 2 weeks ago, we were met with another round of meeting with 5 other cities who are the Prosperity Playbook participants, and there we were meeting without the HUD secretary. He was actually told that no HUD staff could join and meet with affordable housing experts in the field. That's a problem, and that's a big problem going forward. But we need to expand the low-income housing tax credit program. We need to assure long-term affordability for projects and not provide subsidies to private developers in affordable housing options, and make sure that we have the regulatory aspect involved, so we're making sure the homes that people live in also live in dignity and safety. That's what we're about in the city.
So I also am passionate about affordable housing. You know, it's what I do every day. I could talk about this for hours. I won't put you through that. But if you do want to talk housing sometime over a beverage, please let me know. This is a very serious issue. Every night, over 10,000 people in Minneapolis are homeless. And those folks that are on their way out, they're facing some big challenges. For a working family, they have to make over $17 an hour to afford an average apartment. That's a lot of money. Our minimum wage, if we raise it, does not even get us there. We need to think about solving this so we can make sure that families, that Minneapolis is still a city for families, is still a place to set down roots that's affordable for the long term. In Ward 11, we're also feeling this issue. I don't know how many of you got your property tax increase, but it's starting to worry me and worry others when you start to think about when my kids leave, or after my kids leave, or when I'm trying to think of that next part of my life. Am I going to be able to live in this place that, you know, I did set down roots, that I have, that my friends are here in this room, that are next door, that have done so much for my life? We also have a lack of senior housing, and we also, the affordable housing we do have, it's filled. So we need to be thinking much more proactively about what we can do here in Ward 11. I will trying to get into some specifics. The 3 things that I would work on. First, I would also increase the amount in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. It's a flexible fund that we're able to take advantage of opportunities. Second, we need to look at our zoning code. We need to make sure that, I'll honor change the zoning code, and then the other part would be to work on land trust, and I'm happy to talk about that after this.
Erica?
So we know that given the current state of the housing market, we simply need more housing of all kinds, subsidized and market rate. So we need to think about this in the ward specifically and what that's going to look like, because it's going to get built and we should be part of that process, but we need to think citywide too. We know in Ward 10, along the Greenway, zoning got changed from industrial to residential. I used to live behind a lumberyard, and now it's an apartment building. But we know that the council denied that same zoning change in the same place on the Ward 9 end of the Greenway. So if we need all that housing, and that community in Ward 9 wanted it there, I don't know why we didn't build it, so I don't know. We need to be able to create space in our neighborhoods without displacing the cultural elements and communities that worked hard to make those neighborhoods affordable to begin with. So think about all the immigrant businesses on Lake Street, think about the Native community on Franklin Avenue, think about the Somali community in Cedar Riverside. We need to think about what makes sense in this ward specifically. We're probably not building high-rises like downtown, but maybe what we need in Ward 11 is senior housing or co-ops or small apartment buildings instead of single-family homes. We need an inclusionary zoning policy, so we're building market rate and subsidized housing at the same time. We really need to strengthen renters' rights. We need to step up enforcement against slumlords who are refusing to address complaints. We have people calling ICE on tenants who complain. We have slumlords pitting Black and Latino residents against each other, and we are better than that, especially as a city that prides itself on being a sanctuary. We need a just cause eviction ordinance, right of first refusal ordinance, and our recent step, the council's recent step to eliminate Section 8 fund discrimination is great, but we need to make it easier for landlords to accept Section 8.
All right, we got one more question, and then the organizers wanted to give everybody plenty of time to talk to the candidates, and also Fair Vote is back here. If you could raise your hands so they know where you are. There we go. And if you've got more precinct caucus questions or whatever, I'm happy to answer those. All right, so Jeremy, you start with the last question. What is the city of Minneapolis doing well with regards to environmental stewardship, and where do you see the most opportunity for improvement?
So I don't know if you do this as well, but when I go to and visit other cities, it makes me very proud of Minneapolis. When I see what they call recycling, I mean, it'd be funny except for the tragedy that's happening with the environment. So it's something that I think we have a really good thing here. We not only recycle, we've got curbside pickup, we've banned plastic bags, we have one of the best, most bikeable cities in the world. Maybe I'll take that down to the nation, but I would say the world. And we also focus on having walkable communities. What I think we need to improve is really just not something that's addressed in all of these questions. You've heard about different issues like raising the minimum wage, but I see city council as really a service job plus. We have to make sure the city runs well first. We need to make sure that everything is timed, and that takes a little bit. But what I will say is the plus part. As we're working on all of this, the environment should be front and center. We should be thinking about, as we're doing the regular work of the city, how can we be ending the racial equity gaps? How can we be better environmental stewards? And so, to get specific on what we should improve, I think the city needs to do a better job of incentivizing residents and businesses to reduce their carbon footprint. I think we can do more with our city buildings to make them more energy efficient, maybe as well as making them centers for community solar. And finally, I think we need to do more work with our other stakeholders in the district. We need to be talking hand in hand with the watershed district, with the park board, so when they're doing environmental programs, we're not just elevating them, we're amplifying them. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So we need an entity as big as the city to take aggressive action on climate change. As much as we're all trying to do that on our own, it's not enough. It will never be enough. The Clean Energy Partnership is a good first step as a structure to coordinate all of this. Our parkland is critical to our energy footprint, and coordinating with the MPRB is important. Municipal composting is great. We should be working to increase participation in both recycling and composting, including having public composting and recycling receptacles throughout the city in public spaces. We should be leveraging city property as much as possible to capture renewable energy and to power city operations with renewable energy. And as much as the city enterprise should be eating its own dog food, I know from my time working on the capital budget that we struggle a little bit with funding upgrades to the city hall building itself, partly because of the historic preservation concerns, so that's a thing that we need to work out. There are great community solar initiatives happening. Tingletown neighborhood is doing some of this stuff, It's great. It's not enough, though. City properties should have community solar gardens on them. We should adopt a green zones policy to immediately remediate and mitigate environmental damage in our most affected communities, to engage those communities on alternative uses for that land, to support businesses and homes in those zones who want to make their properties and operations more green, and targeting economic development and green economy jobs in those areas. And lastly, we should be making sure that low-income families can afford the cost of upgrades and access to any available energy efficiency programs for their own homes.
Well, Minneapolis is committed to citywide economic opportunity, social equality, and environmental sustainability. And I think what we pride ourselves on is in enacting environmental progressive policies, which can provide examples for more sustainable practices to other municipalities, as well as other businesses and residents in the city. What we're doing really well, I think, is we're articulating a clear and aggressive greenhouse gas emission strategy. This is part of our climate action plan that we adopted in 2013 and is in place today and going forward. It's a roadmap document really to reduce the climate impact by our city 15% by 2015, which we've just accomplished. Yay for us, right? Which is pretty ambitious, especially because we've grown in population, and we've grown in development, and we've grown in businesses. These are all factors, and we've reduced our emissions. I think that's amazing. We also have a goal of having a 30% reduction by 2025. We also established, as we just heard, of course, the nation's first clean energy partnership, and that's a partnership between CenterPoint Energy and Xcel Energy. And we've identified specific strategies that enhance and coordinate community engagement, use data and program participation to aid decision-making, and use our city policy levers as much as we can, as well as our communications channels. We've talked about the organics rollout, and that's a big deal. We've talked about our solar energy and our awards that we've received recently from the Department of Energy, and we need to increase more outreach, and we're going to do that by generating program participation funds through increased franchise fees with our utilities. That's where we're at.
So that was the last question. Can we have a round of applause for our candidate? Don't go away. Talk to somebody.
Need more popcorn.
My table's by the popcorn.
Great job, Deb.